February 9th, 1881. Fyodor Dostoevsky collapsed in his study in St. Petersburg. Blood poured from his mouth. His wife ran to him, screaming. He looked at her and whispered, "I saw it. I finally saw it." 3 hours later, he was dead. But what did he see in those final moments? What truth had consumed him for 30 years of writing? What knowledge had driven him to the edge of madness? And back. Tonight you'll find out. Because Dostoevsky wasn't just a writer. He was an explorer, an archaeologist of the human soul. And what he discovered in those depths, most people spend their entire lives running from. He documented suffering, not to depress you, but to show you something. Something about the architecture of existence itself. Something about why we suffer, why we lie, why we destroy the things we love. And here's what they don't tell you. Dostoevsky found a pattern, a law, an invisible force that governs human behavior. And once you see it, you can never look at people the same way again, including yourself. This is the Hidden Codex, where we reveal what history's greatest minds discovered and what they tried to tell us before they died. Fyodor Dostoevsky, 1821 to 1881, Russian novelist, philosopher, prophet of the modern age. The world knows him for Crime and Punishment, The Brothers Karamazov, Notes from Underground, masterpieces of literature, dark, psychological, profound. But here's what most people miss. Dostoevsky wasn't writing fiction. He was writing field reports from the battlefield of the human psyche. Every character he created was a case study. Every plot, an experiment. Every novel, a diagnosis. And the disease he was diagnosing? Modern consciousness itself. You see, Dostoevsky lived through something that broke him open. In 1849, at age 28, he was arrested, accused of revolutionary activity, sentenced to death. They lined him up before a firing squad. In the freezing cold of a December morning, they tied him to a post, blindfolded him. He heard the soldiers load their rifles. He heard the command, "Ready, aim." And then, nothing. At the last second, a messenger arrived. The Tsar had commuted his sentence. It was a mock execution, psychological torture, designed to break him. It worked, but not in the way they expected. Because standing there, facing death, Dostoevsky saw something. A crack in reality, a glimpse behind the curtain. And what he saw in that moment became the foundation of everything he would write. Before we go deeper, if you sense there's more to human nature than what you've been told, if you're ready to see what most people refuse to see, subscribe to the Hidden Codex. Turn on notifications, because what comes next cannot be unlearned. Let's continue. So, what did Dostoevsky see in that moment before death? He saw that everything we do, everything we believe, every choice we make, is a defense against one thing, one unbearable truth, the truth of our own nothingness. Listen carefully. This is the first law Dostoevsky discovered. He called it different things in different books. But the core principle remained the same. Human beings cannot tolerate their own insignificance. We cannot accept that we are temporary, fragile, meaningless in the cosmic scale, that one day we will cease to exist, and the universe won't even notice. So what do? We build shields. We construct elaborate defenses. We create meaning. We tell ourselves stories. We cling to ideologies, religions, identities, anything that makes us feel significant, permanent, special. But here's the problem. Deep down, we know it's all a lie. And that knowledge, that silent awareness of our own pretense, that's what Dostoevsky called underground consciousness. It's the voice beneath your thoughts, the whisper behind your confidence, the doubt that creeps in at 3 a.m. when you can't sleep, the moment when you look in the mirror and wonder, who is this person? Is any of this real? Does any of this matter? Most people suppress it, push it down, drown it in work, relationships, entertainment, anything to avoid hearing it. But Dostoevsky said that's the worst mistake you can make, because that underground voice, it's not your enemy. It's the only part of you that's actually awake, the only part that's telling the truth. In notes from Underground, he wrote, "I am a sick man. I am a spiteful man. I am an unattractive man." This wasn't self-hatred. It was clarity. The underground man wasn't suffering because he was broken. He was suffering because he was honest. Honest enough to admit what everyone else denied. That beneath all our noble pretensions, beneath all our moral posturing, we are driven by something darker, something we don't want to acknowledge. And that leads us to the second law. Dostoevsky discovered something disturbing about human psychology, something that contradicts everything we're taught about morality, about goodness, about what makes us human. He found that suffering is not something we avoid. It's something we seek, not consciously, not deliberately, but compulsively, unconsciously, like an addiction we can't name. Why? Because suffering gives us proof that we exist, proof that we matter, proof that we're real. Think about it. When you're comfortable, when everything is going well, when you're happy, you feel nothing. You feel empty, transparent, like you're fading. But when you suffer, when you're in pain, suddenly you feel intensely alive, real, solid, undeniable. Dostoevsky wrote, "Man is sometimes extraordinarily, passionately in love with suffering." He wasn't being poetic. He was describing a clinical observation, a pattern he saw repeated in every person he studied, including himself. We create drama. We pick fights. We sabotage good relationships. We cling to grievances. We nurse our wounds. We tell our sad stories over and over. Why? Because suffering confirms our existence. And here's where it gets truly dark. We don't just seek our own suffering. We inflict it on others, not because we're evil, but because it makes us feel powerful, significant, real. The more someone suffers because of us, the more we matter. Dostoevsky saw this pattern everywhere. In Crime and Punishment, Raskolnikov doesn't kill the old woman because he needs money. He kills her to prove something to himself, to prove he's extraordinary, that he exists on a different plane, that ordinary moral laws don't apply to him. But after the murder, he doesn't feel powerful. He feels more hollow than before, because the act revealed the truth. Even his transgression was meaningless. Even his crime was just another desperate attempt to feel real. And that's when the real suffering begins. Not the suffering of guilt, but the suffering of confronting his own nothingness, the fact that even his darkest act changed nothing. So how does this work in practice? In your life, right now, look at your patterns, your relationships, your conflicts. How many times have you started an argument for no real reason? How many times have you pushed away someone who loved you? How many times have you chosen the difficult path when an easier one was available? Most people do this and then wonder why. They blame circumstances, other people, bad luck. But if you understand Dostoevsky's second law, you realize you're doing it on purpose, not consciously, but compulsively, because some part of you believes that suffering equals significance. The person who constantly complains about their problems but never solves them. The person who stays in toxic relationships. The person who self-sabotages every success. They're not weak. They're not broken. They're addicted. Addicted to the proof that suffering provides. And here's the trap. The more you suffer, the more you need to suffer. Because if you stop suffering, you lose your identity. You lose your story. You lose the thing that makes you feel real. Dostoevsky wrote in The Brothers Karamazov, "If God does not exist, everything is permitted." People misunderstand this line. They think it's about morality, about religion. It's not. It's about meaning. If there's no cosmic significance, no ultimate purpose, no grand narrative, then why do anything? Why not do anything? And that's the abyss. That's what Dostoevsky was staring into. Not the absence of rules, but the absence of meaning. Now, here's where Dostoevsky went further than any philosopher before or after him. He discovered something about evil, about cruelty, about the capacity for darkness that lives inside every human being. And what he discovered will disturb you, because Dostoevsky proved that evil doesn't come from ignorance. It doesn't come from trauma. It doesn't come from poverty or oppression or any of the explanations we comfort ourselves with. Evil comes from freedom. And that's the third law. Listen carefully. This might be the most important thing Dostoevsky ever wrote. It's hidden throughout his work, but stated most clearly in The Brothers Karamazov, in the chapter called Rebellion. Ivan Karamazov tells a story about children suffering, children tortured, children dying in agony, and he asks, even if all this suffering leads to some ultimate harmony, some cosmic redemption, is it worth it? And he concludes, no. No amount of future happiness justifies present suffering, especially the suffering of innocence. Then he says something shocking. It's not that I don't accept God. I just respectfully return my ticket. This isn't atheism. This is something darker. This is a man who sees the structure of existence itself and rejects it. Not because he doesn't understand it, but because he understands it too well. And here's what Ivan represents: the logical conclusion of freedom, of consciousness, of the ability to question everything. If we're truly free, we're free to reject existence itself. We're free to say, I don't want to play this game. I don't accept these terms. But that freedom, that radical freedom, is unbearable. Because if we're free to reject existence, we're also free to create our own meaning, our own values, our own rules, and that means we're alone, absolutely alone, with no one to blame, no one to save us, no cosmic parent to tell us what to do. Dostoevsky showed this through Ivan's hallucination. The devil appears to him. But this devil isn't a monster. He's banal, ordinary, pathetic. He complains about his job. He's tired. He wants to retire. Why did Dostoevsky portray the devil this way? Because he understood. Evil isn't some cosmic force outside us. It's the logical extension of our own freedom, our own consciousness, our own ability to choose. And that's terrifying. Because it means we can't blame evil on some external entity. We can't externalize it. We can't fight it out there. It's in here, in us, in our freedom, in our consciousness, in the very thing that makes us human. The person who understands this, truly understands this, faces a choice. The same choice Dostoevsky faced his entire life. Do you accept existence, with all its suffering, all its meaninglessness, all its horror? Or do you return your ticket? And here's what most people don't realize. Returning the ticket doesn't mean suicide. It means something worse. It means living, but refusing to engage, refusing to create meaning, refusing to choose, becoming what Dostoevsky called a man of spite, a man who watches, who judges, who criticizes, but who never creates, never risks, never truly lives. Because living requires accepting the absurdity, the meaninglessness, the suffering, and then choosing anyway. In The Brothers Karamazov, there's another brother, Alyosha, the opposite of Ivan. Alyosha sees the same suffering, the same injustice, the same meaninglessness, but he doesn't return his ticket. He doesn't reject existence. He kisses the earth, literally. He falls to the ground and kisses it, and through that act, he accepts. Not because he's naive, not because he's found some comforting answer, but because he's chosen to say yes. Yes to existence. Yes to life. Yes to the absurd struggle of being human. And that brings us to the fourth law, the one Dostoevsky circled around his entire career, the one he was trying to articulate in that final moment before he died. There is a way out, but it's not what you think. Dostoevsky wasn't a nihilist. Despite everything he saw, despite all the darkness he documented, he believed in something. Not in easy answers, not in comfortable religions, but in something he could barely articulate. He called it active love, not romantic love, not sentimental love, but active love, the kind that requires sacrifice, the kind that hurts, the kind that demands everything and offers no guarantee of reward. In The Brothers Karamazov, Father Zosima says, "Love in action is a harsh and dreadful thing compared to love in dreams." This is the key, the secret, the thing Dostoevsky spent his life trying to show us. We can't think our way out of meaninglessness. We can't philosophize our way to significance. We can't reason ourselves into purpose. We can only act. We can only choose. We can only love. And not love as an emotion, not love as a feeling, but love as a practice, as a discipline, as a constant, deliberate, painful choice to engage with existence despite knowing it's absurd. But here's the trap. Here's what makes this so difficult. Dostoevsky discovered that the moment you try to systematize this, the moment you turn it into a program or a philosophy or a set of rules, it dies. It becomes another defense mechanism, another way of avoiding the real work. That's why every character in his novels who has it figured out, who has a perfect system, who knows the answer, is either a fool or a villain, the Grand Inquisitor, the ultimate utilitarian. He's created a perfect system, a system that eliminates freedom, eliminates suffering, eliminates the burden of choice, and he's convinced it's compassionate, merciful, right. But Christ, in the story, doesn't argue with him, doesn't debate, doesn't explain why he's wrong. Christ just kisses him, one kiss, and walks away. Why? Because the Grand Inquisitor's mistake isn't intellectual, it's existential. He's trying to solve the problem of existence. But existence isn't a problem to be solved. It's a reality to be engaged with. And that engagement requires freedom, requires suffering, requires the constant risk of making the wrong choice. That's what Dostoevsky meant by active love, not solving other people's problems, not fixing the world, but engaging, risking, choosing, over and over, without guarantee, without certainty. Most people read Dostoevsky and think he's pessimistic, dark, depressing. They're wrong. Dostoevsky is the most optimistic writer who ever lived. Because he stared into the abyss, he documented every horror of human consciousness. He explored every dark corner of the soul, and he still said, "Choose life, choose engagement, choose love." Not because it's easy, not because it makes sense, but because it's the only thing that makes us human. Now, let me show you how this connects to everything we've discussed, because this is where Dostoevsky's genius becomes clear. The underground consciousness, the addiction to suffering, the burden of freedom, they're all connected. They're all symptoms of the same condition. We are creatures who can question our own existence. We're conscious of our consciousness. We're aware of our awareness. And that creates a gap, a distance, a separation from immediate experience. Animals don't have this problem. They exist. They don't question their existence. They don't wonder if it matters. They just are. But we can't just be. We have to know that we are. We have to reflect on it, judge it, give it meaning. And that's both our curse and our possibility. The curse is obvious. We're trapped in our own minds, always one step removed from direct experience, always watching ourselves, always performing, even when we're alone. But the possibility is that we can choose. We can decide what our existence means. We can create values. We can determine purpose, not discover it, create it. And that's what Dostoevsky was trying to show us, through character after character, through novel after novel. Raskolnikov creates his own moral law and discovers it's empty. Ivan rejects all meaning and goes mad. The underground man refuses to engage and becomes a ghost. But Alyosha chooses, without certainty, without guarantee, and that choice makes him real. Here's what Dostoevsky knew that we've forgotten. Meaning isn't something you find. It's something you create through action, through engagement, through the constant, difficult, painful choice to participate in existence despite knowing it's absurd. Every time you choose to act with integrity when it would be easier to lie. Every time you choose to engage when it would be easier to withdraw. Every time you choose to create when it would be easier to destroy. You're creating meaning, not discovering it, creating it. And that creation, that's the only answer to nihilism. Not an intellectual answer, not a philosophical answer, but an existential answer, an answer written in action. Now, here's the part they don't teach you in school, the part scholars avoid because it's too uncomfortable. Dostoevsky believed we're in a war, a spiritual war, not metaphorical, actual. He believed there are forces in the universe that want to mechanize us, turn us into functions, into predictable, controllable, explainable things. Forces that want to eliminate our freedom because freedom is dangerous, unpredictable, uncontrollable. And he believed that every time we choose comfort over growth, safety over risk, explanation over mystery, we're surrendering. We're giving up our humanity, piece by piece. In Notes from Underground, the underground man rages against the Crystal Palace, the utopian vision of the future where everything is rational, ordered, explained, where human beings are happy, healthy, productive. And he says, I don't want it, even if it's perfect, especially if it's perfect, because perfection is death. Perfection is the end of freedom, the end of choice, the end of humanity. He'd rather suffer. He'd rather be irrational. He'd rather be unpredictable, because at least then he's real. At least then he's human. This isn't romanticism. This isn't glorifying suffering. This is Dostoevsky warning us. The moment you try to eliminate all suffering, all conflict, all difficulty, you eliminate humanity itself. Because humanity isn't our rationality. It's not our logic. It's our capacity to choose, even when the choice doesn't make sense. Especially when it doesn't make sense. That's what makes us more than machines, more than programs, more than predictable biological responses. Our freedom, our terrible, beautiful, unbearable freedom. And in 1881, in those final moments, bleeding out in his study, I think that's what Dostoevsky saw. Not a vision, not a revelation, but clarity, pure clarity. He had spent 30 years exploring human consciousness, documenting every defense mechanism, every self-deception, every desperate attempt to avoid the truth. And in the end, he understood. There is no escape, no final answer, no ultimate solution. There's only the choice, the constant, moment-by-moment choice to engage or withdraw, to create or destroy, to say yes or return your ticket. And that choice, that's not a burden. That's freedom. That's what makes us human. That's what makes existence worth accepting. Not because it's comfortable, not because it makes sense, but because it's ours. Our choice, our creation, our meaning. So, what does this mean for you? It means Dostoevsky is asking you the same question he asked himself every day of his life. Are you living, or are you defending yourself against life? Are you creating meaning, or are you waiting to find it? Are you choosing, or are you just reacting? Most people spend their entire lives in defense mode, building walls, constructing explanations, clinging to certainties, anything to avoid the naked truth of existence. But those walls, they don't protect you, they imprison you, and one day you'll realize you've been so busy defending yourself against life that you forgot to live it. Dostoevsky understood suffering, not because he was pessimistic, but because he was honest. He knew that existence hurts, that consciousness is a burden, that freedom is terrifying. But he also knew the only thing worse than suffering is refusing to suffer, because refusing to suffer means refusing to feel, refusing to engage, refusing to be fully human. So he chose every day, despite the pain, despite the absurdity, despite knowing there was no guarantee. He chose to write, to create, to engage, to love, and in doing so, he showed us something, not an answer, but a possibility. The possibility that meaning isn't something the universe gives us. It's something we create, through our choices, through our actions, through our constant, deliberate, painful engagement with existence. That's the hidden truth in Dostoevsky's work. That's what he spent his life trying to articulate. That's what he saw in that final moment. Not that life is meaningless, but that meaning is our responsibility, our burden, our freedom. And once you understand that, everything changes. You stop waiting for purpose to find you. You stop looking for answers outside yourself. You stop blaming circumstances, other people, the universe for your emptiness. Because you realize the emptiness isn't the problem. The emptiness is the canvas, and you're holding the brush. The question is, what are you going to create? Dostoevsky saw something that most people spend their lives avoiding. He saw that we are alone, absolutely alone, in a universe that doesn't care, with no cosmic parent, no ultimate safety net, no guaranteed meaning. And instead of running from that truth, he accepted it. He kissed the earth. He said, yes. Not because it was easy, not because he had faith, not because he found some comforting answer, but because he chose to. Because that choice, that simple, terrible, beautiful choice, was the only thing that made him human, the only thing that made him real, the only thing that made existence worth accepting. And now you know what he knew. You've seen what he saw. You understand what he understood. The question is, what will you do with it? Will you return your ticket? Will you withdraw into spite and judgment and safety? Or will you kiss the earth? Will you say yes? Will you choose? Most people choose neither. They drift, they distract, they defend. But you're still here. You've listened this far, which means something in you recognizes the truth. Something in you knows. This is it. This is the real question. This is what everything else is avoiding. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Welcome to consciousness. Welcome to freedom. Welcome to the unbearable lightness of being human. It's terrifying. It's painful. It's absurd. And it's the only thing worth choosing. If this opened your eyes to something you've been avoiding, hit that subscribe button. Because here at the Hidden Codex, we don't stop at the surface. We go deeper, into the darkness, into the truth they tried to bury. Next time, we'll explore Nietzsche's final warning, the one he wrote right before his collapse. You don't want to miss that. Until then, stay awake, keep choosing, and remember, suffering isn't the enemy. Refusing to suffer is.